Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Roll call.
Ms. Alling is here. Ms. Ballantyne. Here. Ms. Bash. Here. Mr. Larson.
Here.
Mr. Rasmussen.
Yes.
Mr. Samuel Lamb.
Here.
And Mr. Schultz is absent tonight.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Can we move Taher up, Taher, is that how I say it? Up on the agenda so they can out of here in the snow?
Is that a motion?
A motion, I have a motion to do that, please.
Second.
Yes.
Second. All right. Let's vote.
Dana, you were the motion, John, you were the second.
John did the motion.
It's all good.
Motion carries 6-0. Next, public announcements, recognitions, upcoming events.
First of all, I want to congratulate Brooklyn Maves. She broke the Evansville High School girls basketball single game scoring record with 38 points in a game recently against Jefferson. That was at the end of last month. Also, a shout out to our Evansville High School art teachers and their students. Actually, while Elliot and I were at convention, they did have a photography artist reception at Creekside on the 23rd of January with some of their framed art pieces that were taken all over southern Wisconsin, and we got very good feedback on that. Also want to both congratulate and say thank you to the Evansville High School FFA. They put on a district leadership development event contest, and that was again right at the end of last month. I have done quite a bit of judging as an administrator. I get asked to do some things. I try to shy away from forensics since I don't have much of a background there. I've done a lot of DECA judging, but this was my first FFA contest, and I learned a lot. I was in a room with two other judges that knew a lot more than I did, and it was a speech contest where they had a written section that they sent in ahead of time, so I had to do my homework. But it was a great night. We had schools from all around the area at Evansville High School, and I think we showed very well. We also had some Chinese New Year celebrations at both the elementary and intermediate school, and just want to thank Sarah Tashin for advocating for that and then setting that up both with our students and our staff. Last week was also National School Counseling Week. One of my priorities is to make sure that when we have days and weeks, months sometimes like that, that we do recognize our staff, and the counseling staff was thankful for that. A lot of positive comments on our social media for that as well. Last week we had a Welcome to 4K meeting, which makes me feel old because I saw one of my former students with their kids in school. So getting into the second generation now. I never thought I'd get there, but here we are. And it was, according to Jamie Fellows and to Mrs. Erdahl, it was one of the best that they've had attended. So hopefully that's good news for our 4K numbers. We also had a parent meeting at the high school. This was the third one this year. I did include for the board some of the topics that were covered, just so you know what parents are asking about. Daily announcements from the high school, course registration for next year, the transition of 8th and into 9th graders, how big a class has to run, or excuse me, how big a class has to be to run at the high school, a little bit of weighted grading, which you'll hear some more about tonight, and then school safety procedures. On the other end of the spectrum, 5th grade had a couple of concerts. Again, it's fantastic that we can use our PAC for that, both in the morning where you see a lot of grandparents in the audience, and then of course at night when you see more parents. The Evansville Fund I bring up because Again, they had thousands of dollars in grants to our staff this past year, and they had their chocolate extravaganza on Saturday. That was my first. Mr. Schwartz was like a main organizer of that. So it was, I don't know if the turnout was as good as people had hoped, but hopefully they raised a lot of money that night. And parent-teacher conferences at both McKenna and Levi are happening this week, with school canceled today. Those remaining conferences, teachers will reach out, and if you had something scheduled for tonight, they'll give you a range of options to come in and do that at your convenience over the next couple of weeks, so we won't miss those. All right.
Can I add two things?
Yeah.
First off, thank you to Amy Swartout and I believe Tyler Everest, my daughter tells me. We went to the 8th grade parent meeting at the end of January, and there was a mix-up with the time it was supposed to start, was communicated, but they did a wonderful job, Amy especially, of giving us information as a first-time high school parent, and a tour at the end. And if you haven't gone on a tour of the high school, I highly recommend it, because I now know where things are. And I didn't understand how it was organized, but it was very lovely of them to stay late to help us with that. And then just on a personal thing, I just want to say thank you to those who helped craft the missions, the district's mission, vision, and commitments. Doing a lot of thinking lately with all that's going on, and I just want to say that I'm proud to be on the board that's helping to ensure that all learners are thriving, contributing, and belonging.
Thank you, very good. Any other announcements? If not, public presentations. We have Ryan Jane and topic making Scott Anderson's green team position paid.
Thank you. So, good to be here. I met everyone on the board last fall. I'm Ryan James. I'm a parent and community member in the district, and I'm also running for one of the upcoming vacancies on the board. So I hope to be here more often in the future. But I wanted to speak briefly in support of making Scott Anderson's work with the green team a paid position. I think that the work he's done is really admirable, and so he's very much deserving of that. And I also wanted to say, my understanding is that there are lots of other examples of teachers that are going above and beyond and should be potentially considered for stipends. And so I would urge the board to consider that. I think that when the public is made aware of the work that teachers do, like what Scott is doing in this case, they tend to be overwhelmingly in support of it, and I think would appreciate them being paid for this extra work when they're going above and beyond. And so last comment I'll say, just with that in mind, as someone who watches board meetings online normally, last week, unfortunately, the audio was out. And so hopefully that was just a one-off thing that's been addressed. But I think that's just another thing that got me thinking about how important it is that the district is continuing to do everything possible to get the word out about all the great things our staff are doing. So, that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, that's the only one, right?
Yep.
Moving on to information and discussion, we'll move up food service and Tyler report.
Yeah. So obviously Tyler's our food service vendor, and Jim and Lisa are here tonight. And they did have a report that they put together called Board Bites, which I'm sure they're going to talk about. One thing I just want to preface before they come up is something that I had previewed with the board earlier. So this is, we're really happy to have Taher back. I won't say anything negative about our previous company, but we've had very good response to food service this year, kids' meals, and both the students and parents being happy with that. With that said, and that contract that was signed not even a year ago, there are some things that we will need to work through. So Lisa and Tom and I, and then Jim and Tom and I have met several times. And so what we have right now is a fixed cost contract. And there's some guarantees for the district, which are always good. because we don't want to use Fund 10, our general fund money, to pay for Fund 50, which is our food service account, our budget. But at the same time, we want to be good partners with Taher and work with them. So there's another option if we were to go back out to bid, and Taher's asking for bid. I think Jim might speak a little bit about that tonight, which would be a cost reimbursable. Having been in another district that had a cost reimbursable contract, it really makes you even more of a partner, I think, with that food service company because, for example, Lisa and I would meet on a monthly basis and look at what our budget projection was for that month and then what the actual was, and then even then calendar year to date. So where we were that month and then where we were throughout that fiscal year. And so there's quite a partnership there. There's still some guarantees that we're not going to lose money. You want to try to keep a balance in Fund 50 because the equipment itself is ours, even though it's Taher's certified kitchen. And so if a stove goes or a refrigerator, freezer goes, those are things that we have to pay out of Fund 50. So we would go out to bid again. When we do that, there is a very strict process that most of the board members, I think, know from the last time around, that DPI controls. We set up where we want the points to go, but then once the whatever bids come in, and Taher will certainly bid again, once those bids come in, whoever has the top score gets that contract, no matter who that is. So it could be another vendor, but we've, again, had a very good relationship this past year with Taher, and we're trying to work with them so that they're not losing money on this endeavor and we can be good partners with them. So with that, I will have Lisa and Jim step up and talk a little bit about what's happening in food service.
I'm gonna present these strawberries to the board. So Pam Welty couldn't be, we decided, I said stay home because she lives in Clinton and she was, but we had planned on doing this. She had planned on preparing them after lunch today, but of course there was no school. So out of the graciousness and goodness of Tammy's heart, she came in and finished the project. So I will say the staff the staff in each of the kitchens, we have built such a partnership with each of the staff members, and they're great, and they're on board of, creating a program that is awesome, and, we keep working at different things and collaborate together. So our staff that we have in Evansville is amazing. And Jeannie is one of our original staff, so I have seen her growing over the last 17 years, so it's fun to watch that as well. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I outlined it, just a few things in the board bites, and overall our participation is 72% with breakfast, lunch, and meal equivalents, which is, based on the enrollment being down, we feel like we keep getting better, so we continue to improve that. We have goals every month. For example, the high school breakfast participation has been a challenge. It's been only like 30 a day, so 2 months ago it's like, okay, how are we going to entice more kids to come and dine? And last week we were hitting 60 a day at the high school, so that's a record for our high school numbers, so we're really encouraged about that. And again, it's a collaboration between our people and ourselves and our ideas and getting everyone involved. So lunch participation is at 690. Our goal really is to be about 750 a day. We have a stretch to go on that. Again, getting kids to eat and excited about lunch is a challenge everywhere. Again, we work to meet that challenge. So total meals are close to 1,100 a day, or off one. Just kind of quick highlights under student learning and engagement. Chef Amanda visited on Friday at the high school. When this was prepared, I didn't have pictures, but we do have pictures now. We'd like to get that on social media and get everyone excited about that. She will be back in March. We're going to do our first Kids in the Kitchen class with the 5th grade students, and she'll be cooking at the middle school and at the high school. So we're excited about that. Our harvest of the month is Meyer lemon, rutabaga, and chamomile for March, and so there's always recipes on the newsletter every month. And if we're not receiving that, I'll make sure that we get that PDF out to the parents and it's on our district website for food service, but if we can email it out to the teachers and that kind of thing. That's always fun. There's always a little recipe. And I asked myself, what is the difference between a Meyer lemon and a regular lemon? I asked Chef Nick that, and he just said it's really a fancier lemon. And restaurants, there's not too much difference in a Meyer lemon, but we hope to see some Meyer lemon frosting on a birthday cake in the month of March. We've been doing Lucky Tray Day, kind of FFA students. They helped with their back to school breakfast. That was engagement there. United Taste of America is really a featured menu each month that ties into the American eats and some traditional eats. This month we have chicken legs and mac and cheese combination with cornbread. And so each month it's a little different. Doesn't necessarily mean our elementary lunch count is high that day, but because we're trying to get kids, interested in something different, and we keep offering that. Excited about March. We have a couple different things. March 3rd through the 7th is National Breakfast Week, and then the whole month is focused on Food Connects Us. And so we're coming up with, how does food really connect us? If you think about our kitchens, it's really the nucleus of our family. We do homework there, we cook there, we play games, might sometimes have an argument or two or a challenge. But our kitchens, if you think about that, we bring people together and connect food with relationships and partnerships, and we're going to do some things about that. And actually, interestingly enough, Pam and I were brainstorming this afternoon about what could we do for breakfast week, and the theme is finding a clue. And so, following clues to nutrition. And so we came up with a little promotion that we're going to run at the elementary. Don't have the exact details mapped out yet, but I think it was a great idea. Just having the kids eat breakfast every day and have a clue with a cashier, and then in the cafeteria, that pause somewhere, or a footprint, it's not a paw. And then we'll figure out how we embrace that. So that's gonna be kind of fun. The family and community partnerships, our alternative education, and I forget the young man who's dishwashing for us, I forget his name, but you told me what his name was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's been doing a great job, and it's, he has some time. I believe one of the staff members in our kitchen at the high school started in that program 3 years ago, and we still employ her today. So they love having him there and washing dishes, so that's been a great partnership. The career fair, we're actually going to have a booth on April 16th. Amanda's going to come and talk at that career fair about the culinary arts and engaging kids in that program. And the dinner theater is April 12th. And actually, when we were here before, we were doing the dinner theater. I think we might have started it actually, but we're pretty excited to come back, and we're partnering with that dinner. It's the play is Matilda. So Pam and Chef Amanda are coming up with some menu ideas to tie in that play. So that'll be an exciting event.
Chocolate cake, I have.
Chocolate cake, maybe.
That would make sense.
Yeah. We could put some beets in it. Beet cake was a hit this month. No. All right, we'll see, yeah, chocolate cake. So that's always a fun thing. And then growth and development. We have monthly staff meetings. We talk about food safety and workplace safety. Our corporate dietitian, I just want to mention the administrative review process over the last 2 months in preparation for that December event. Our dietitian came in, she did some training with the staff to prepare them on production records. And then just the collaboration between the district and ourselves, the audit went really well. And it was at the middle school. Middle school and high schools are always a little challenging. And interestingly enough, on some of the things that, that they pointed out, we corrected right away. And they were minor things, and they put it on the report anyway. It's like, I was like, well, they have to document something. Anyway, everyone did an awesome job, and I was really proud of the staff and Pam and all the work that the district and ourselves collaborated on ensuring that was a successful process. We have several tracking programs that we track our finances, something that we call a flash sheet. We have an operating statement like Nate was talking about. So we monitor our program all the time so that if we see that there's a problem, we can fix it before the end of the school year. And then staff training is constant. yeah, constantly training and trying to better ourselves and cooking processes and batch cooking and making sure it's fresh. And it's a never-ending process, really, and just to make sure that we are doing the best job that we can for our children. And then Mr. Mannon will talk about the rebid process.
Well, just, thanks, Lisa. Nate talked a little bit about the differences between the cost reimbursable and the fixed price contract. We have 3 out of 50 of our accounts here in Wisconsin that have a fixed price contract, as you do. And really, the difference in TAR is that we really want to do more scratch cooking, more fresh food. We want to bring in chefs, we want to do other things. And with a fixed price, we're limited to what the price is that's in the bid, and we have to be a low bidder in order to get the contract. So we have a difficult time competing in that environment. But in addition, when your previous company ordered commodities for last year, or for the entire year this year, they bought more processed foods, things that we can't even access. So that's been some of the trouble. We're in the process right now of ordering commodities for next year, and what we'll do is put more money into DoD produce. So we'll get fresh produce instead of more canned, sugary fruits for the kids, and less processed foods, more whole foods, shredded cheese for our pizzas, rather than a frozen pizza that's going to come in pre-made and ready to serve, if that makes sense to you. So we appreciate your willingness to do it. Hopefully we'll come back and be awarded through, but we'll put our best proposals together and hopefully earn your business again. But we appreciate you taking that step.
If board members have not seen it before, especially at lunch, if you go through the line, they do have lots of fresh fruits and vegetables that the students can take, I think, as much as they want. Some will come back for more, and they are exposed to things that they might not typically eat at home. And again, that's something that we want to be able to keep rather than serving the sugary cup of pears or something like that they might get.
Right. I mean, Bruce Tower believes strongly in keeping our core values. So even though we've struggled financially because of some of the decisions that were made previous to us getting here, we're still delivering the program as we proposed it because that's important to him. But because we're hopefully good partners, we can move forward and get that rectified so both of us will be successful and we'll be able to have a long relationship. So, but any questions do you have for us or on the program or anything that's going on? I don't know anything about the egg prices. I know. I can't tell you about that.
I guess why did you bid as a fixed price to begin with?
We didn't make that decision, so that's a decision that was made, in collaboration with the previous company and Tom. DPI, quite honestly, pushes that versus the cost reimbursable because it's simpler for a Tom or a Nate to monitor because there's basically a price and a number of meals, and as long as we bill you the right number.
Sure.
Their concern is if you're replacing our costs, if you're reimbursing us for our costs, then you should be more involved in what we're buying. The good news is we have invoices here that are always available to anyone who would want to go through and take a look. But basically, you're partnering with us to make the decisions that we know you want for your program.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully Pam will make good decisions with those purchases. And again, as Nate said, we can sit down monthly. We do a weekly inventory, so we know exactly where our food cost is throughout the year and can make adjustments as we see prices fluctuate to try to keep the best food in front of the kids, but yet protect the school funds.
Having been in a cost reimbursable, I'll give you an example, because Lisa and I have been through this together before. But let's say that breakfasts are down, or can we even grow the high school breakfast even more? Then it is a partnership, like we may bring Jeff in and say, hey, is it possible that we could create some passing time so that they can come back to the cafeteria and grab something? Is that something that the teachers would accept, or do they not want food in their classroom? So we have these discussions. Another one, like if we get input from parents, like, hey, we're seeing some things on the menu that we don't like, we'd rather see some of these other things, we come back to Tyler and talk about that.
So when we go out to bid, we bid for cost reimbursable contracts?
We would now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so before we bid for the other type of contract,
Yeah.
I see. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say this is it, but in the fixed, you're really focused on the money aspect of it, and that is important. We don't want to lose money. But I think in cost reimbursable, there's a lot more options in terms
Sure.
of quality of food too.
Is that points metric calculated differently?
Yes.
Okay.
But some of the points will go towards the guarantee, so we'll guarantee what the projection that we say we're gonna have.
Yeah.
So you still have, skin in the game. It's just that, if you wanted us to start a program that was gonna be more costly and we couldn't raise the price of what we're billing you, even though you
Right.
can get the revenue, we
Sure.
can't get it. For this year, 3% is the maximum we can raise prices for next year.
Sure.
So if we can't balance the budget with a 3% price increase, now we're forced to either cut back the program in order to make it financially or fund the district, instead of make a profit for ourselves or get the fee that we intended to get. So
Sure.
that's the difficulty with the fixed price. It really becomes a low bid situation. So.
With cost reimbursable, does that have any impact, positive or negative, to our own meal costs, like what we charge students or faculty? Is that gonna be affected in any way?
It could, but those always go before the board.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, is that tied to what you would be asking for cost reimbursable, or?
From the budget.
We would prepare a budget,
Yeah.
share it with Nate and Tom, say, here's what we see going forward, and then, put whatever options are out there.
Yeah, I think, if I'm thinking back right, Lisa, because I've worked with Lisa for 5 years now, in 4 years of a similar contract, I think we only asked one time for the board to raise meal costs.
Ultimately, it's entirely up to you two. You could say, no, we're gonna hold prices the same anyway, and run the budget as is, and that's still guaranteed as whatever it is the bottom line says it's gonna be. So you control it all yourself.
I think some years we've presented like 3 budgets. Okay, this is what happens if we do nothing. This is what happens if we do 5 cents. This is what, I think one.
Yeah, and we can look at Fund 50, and if there's a balance that we can spend down some, then we can keep things stable without passing the costs on.
Is this an annual renewal?
Well,
Every 5 years after
Yes.
this next
After
one.
this
Yeah.
next
It's still an annual,
Yeah, it's
every year,
annual, yeah.
we'll renegotiate, talk
within
about the
the
budget,
program.
talk
Sure.
about price increases, yeah.
For the contract, it's 5.
You can continue renewing it for up to 4 more years. after the first.
Yeah. and not that we would want to, but if at any time, let's say Tahoe does win it again, if at any time in that next 5 years, the district is unhappy, they can, very
Yeah.
similar to what we're doing now, at Tahoe's request to go back to bid, the district can go back to bid as well.
And it is your program. We want to listen, we want to make it create the best program for the district as possible and listen to that. We have a survey going on right now in February, so when all the results come in, we'll sit down and look at them and see what everyone has to say. So hopefully we get a lot of feedback.
And you asking us to rebid is more because of that fixed cost, or say nothing else? Got it.
I got a couple quick high-level questions. So you say your budget, so that to me is like a GMP, guaranteed maximum price, right? You said at the beginning of the years, right? And then your reimbursable, how is that done? Is it true cost plus a fee? Or is it rates and a fee, like you bill X amount per person and then a fee on top of it?
No, it's just a fee. So basically, we'll just be working for a fee that's part of the budget, part of the expenses in that budget.
So it's a fixed fee, and then you list what's in it, right? Like project management time, billable time, what's all billable in that, I guess?
Well, the fee is really our profitability. Then the bill that you get every month has food, labor, other costs, all explained and laid out. So the only thing that's coming back to Tara really is the fee. The rest of it is expenses that we purchase for
We used to run the
here
program.
To run the program. And then, again, you still have all the revenue on your side of it. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah, it does, but the only quick question I have is, when you say labor, what is in that labor?
sure, Pam, the food service director's labor.
Correct, is that full-time probably, right?
Yeah.
And then our hourly staff, their related benefits and so forth. So Lisa's time, my time, that's all part of our fees.
Okay, so that's built into your fees, that is not billable time. That was my question.
Yep, no. Good question.
It is a good question.
Do you manage the staff there, or is it on us to manage this?
No, we met,
Okay.
Pam does. She's our,
Okay, got
she's
it.
their on-site director, and
Yeah.
so I manage Pam, so.
Got it, got it.
and
So Pam
Lori-
is under you and that's
Yes,
nothing to do with
and-
your staff.
And I'm
Got it.
under him, so.
Love the
We're
org
all
chart.
under,
Always goes
we're all
right.
under Bruce. If there's,
Love it.
I mean, that's the other thing that is unique about Taher. There's not that many layers between ourselves and Bruce Taher.
True.
And the other major so if something needs to change or if we see an innovative idea, we can, run it up the flagpole quite quickly, depending on what it is, and then, keep things moving. Whereas an Airmark or a Chartwell's, it's a lot of layers. So, or I should say our competitors. But
No,
they're,
I
all,
appreciate that.
all good companies.
Managing people is probably the hardest part, so.
Oh my gosh, yes, it is. HR is, yeah. Can take a lot of time sometimes. I remember when Evansville, when we were here, it was one of my first districts 24 years ago, it was all union. And we have, and I don't think anyone was here at that time, but yeah, some funny stories way back then. Some interesting stories, I should say.
Who does HR?
All right, is there any other questions? No, thank you.
Yeah,
You're
thank
very
you so
welcome.
much.
She's just like really for that.
All right, well, Elliot's working there. We'll go to the district administrator update.
Um,
Thank you, everyone.
I
Thank you.
I think the more that we talk about donations, and I know that we have quite a few people that do watch our board meetings, it seems to feed itself with other people that learn about what these donations are being used for and also then contribute. So we have a bunch more to talk about tonight. When we do this, Paige follows up with a letter, and then we actually link in the account so they could watch the live stream and see us thanking them from a couple of days before. So first of all, we had a $100 donation from Mike and Julie Scarman toward the cross-country program, and then another $100 donation from K&L Engineering, also toward the cross-country program. We had a $500 donation from Robert and Carrie Hawkinson toward the Performing Arts Center improvements. As usual, you're almost always going to see this on our donations. $30 from the Floans toward the music department at the intermediate and middle schools. Two that I'll move around just a little bit. We had two senior projects. Tyler Everest's name was mentioned tonight. $340 from Tyler Everest's senior project, again toward the drama department at the high school. Tyler's one of our youth apprentices. When you go to the musical this year, you'll see him on the lights and soundboards. Another, this one a little bit larger, there was a $1,060 donation from senior Haley Ross. Her senior project will go toward the softball program at the high school. And then just moving back, a fairly large donation, not large enough to have to be board approved, but thank you to Dave Olson, $3,000 to the high school boys basketball program. And then one we've mentioned in the past, the high school staff, if they wear jeans on Friday, donate. That money gets used for families in need. Again, it could be test cost, field trip costs, those sorts of things. So $40 from the high school teachers toward their jeans fund. And then again, a big shout out to our PTO. $1,300 came in this past, about the past month in 3 different areas. $50 to the middle school social studies department. Mr. Anderson at TRIS will be happy. $500 to purchase some human body models for a unit they're on. And then $750 for speech and language and what we call AAC, or really communication devices for our students that might be nonverbal or struggle to communicate in more traditional ways. So thank you so much to our donors, and we have another big one tonight that's an action item. I'll talk about a little bit later. For the rest, yeah.
Good question. First of all, that's awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. Super awesome that people take the time to even think to do that. Just wanted to ask compliance piece for Title IX when we get donations in for sports. Obviously, we have to make sure that all club sports are getting their needs
Yeah.
met. And so I think this is awesome, and also we're being compliant in the fact of a sport that maybe is not as recognized is still.
So what would happen in this case is if a donation like that comes in for a particular sport, then Kendall's activities athletics budget is opened up to provide that same kind of support. For example, in this case, maybe the girls' basketball program, so that we're
Yeah.
treating each one equally.
Perfect, awesome.
You bet.
Keep donations going, thank you.
I won't say too much, but I just gave the board a little bit of background on Fastbridge and Ames Webb. Mark's got his report coming up a little bit later tonight. Fastbridge, we have traditionally used. Ames Webb, we are having to use as part of Act 20 with some of the changes in not only universal screener, but then monitoring and probes after that. Mark and I also met with Jeff, Kim, and the counselors at the high school. We've talked a little bit about grading and then what happens at the end of really now going into a senior year. So we've had the Laude system at the high school, which would have incentivized taking certain higher level classes for additional points. That system was fine, but we really do have to adapt to direct admit, which now is the top 10% of every high school class can get that acknowledgement going into their senior years. So juniors at the end of that year they don't submit, but they opt into that program. Their transcripts and their actually GPAs are sent in, and then they hear back from colleges. That was the first time that happened this past year. You also have the Wisconsin Guarantee, which is specifically for UW-Madison, obviously a very competitive school. That's the top 5%. If you're looking at how many kids does this impact, at the high school of Evansville size, that's about 7 or 8 students that would be guaranteed admission into UW-Madison. So when we talk about the Laude system, it simply does not fit into what the state is now asking us to submit. And so what we've been working on more recently is if we have to send in GPAs, how are we going to break any tiebreakers that we have? And so this still has to go to the staff for approval, but we've got a couple of big ones. ACT, but ACT on the state testing day, which is their junior year for Evansville High School, which helps our school report card scores. If there's any thought that if the Laude system phases out and students wouldn't be motivated to take advanced placement courses, that's one of the tiebreakers as well, both for top 10% and top 5%. And then finally, number of credits. So a student that is taking a rigorous course but is taking extra credits and not study halls would be rewarded for that over students that are taking the a bare minimum. That would also be the same set of tiebreakers for the Academic Excellence Scholarship. That used to be one of the bigger ones. It's not necessarily one of the bigger ones now, but it still equates to about $10,000 over 4 years. So those are some of the discussions that we'll have. Remember, this always comes back to the board in the student handbooks that go to the board in the summer that are approved, and you'll see some changes with that. Going on to family and community partnerships. I did include the social media report and then some of those snippets just down below that Paige has up there. You'll see that we're up in the first couple of months with Facebook subscribers, but also followers on Instagram. And when I first got into the district and was wondering how we interact with Social School for EDU, the company that manages our 2 social media accounts, Instagram and Facebook, I was not used to them and not used to how they worked. We've really, at least in my opinion, have formed a really good partnership with them. So for example, Jess Leonard, who's our account manager, was looking at an account on Instagram that Mandy Fergans, who does a fantastic job, by the way, an unpaid position at this point, which I just found out about, and she is looking for information, but that particular Instagram page is really for high school students to get out announcements, to let them know what's going on, to recognize other high school students. And so we actually had a meeting with Steph Sins, who is kind of a regional manager, Jess, who's our account manager, and then Mandy. Looking at that account, we learned quite a bit from Mandy about how she's putting some of that together. Some of it she's seeking out on her own. It's not even being sent to her, so there's some again, work on her part. But what we decided is we're gonna keep that account because it is a great account for our high school students and then recent graduates. You'll see a lot of the followers are like class of 24, class of 23 graduates. But then what we're looking to do is have kind of a mutually beneficial relationship. So if things come in on bowling, which might not necessarily be sent, wrestling, which is obviously a huge following, and then even cheer, we're trying to get that word out to those coaches and then those that monitor those other accounts. If they send it to us, our Facebook following right now, as you can see up there, is 3,800 followers. That's one of the biggest that you'll see in this area. So we can help promote what they're doing as well with this. So it's been, again, a good partnership, and Jess has always got great ideas. Some of the things that you see, I sent her some raw information, like I'll send her a couple of paragraphs and then some pictures, and then she changes that into a reel. Obviously, it's what she does, and she's talented with it. So even on a little bit of a sneak preview here, but we do have a school crossing guard week coming up pretty soon, and you'll see what she did with some of the pictures that I sent her of those. So happy with that relationship and how it's going. You'll also see that for a school of our size at that bottom there, that we really are performing pretty well based on our enrollment and then how many followers and how much action we have on that Facebook page. In a positive way compared to some of the other Facebook pages that are out there. I won't say any more. CISA 2, probably one of the best presentations. So monthly, I do go to CISA 2. The other superintendents are there, and CISA 2's done a great job. Dan Hanrahan, who's the director there, has actually asked superintendents to help build the agenda so they're getting what they want out of these, and he's got great connections. He can get the state superintendent in, he can get any legal counsel in that he wants, he can get anybody from DPI that he wants. There's only 13 CISAs in the state, so he's got quite a bit of influence. He did have Ann Chapman there, and if you look at that presentation, we won't do that now, but there are some fantastic statistics on a number of things, including revenue limits, referenda, special education funding, that I think I will use and the board will use later on as we start to state our case about public school funding. You'll see several slides that she brought up about how much money is going into private school education at this point, and it was one of the best presentations that we've had. So I will glean some of that and bring that back to the board at different points. And then finally, I do want to thank Lieutenant Jones. We talked a little bit about doing the safety assessment. I wouldn't worry too much because when you do the safety assessment, it's asking really specific questions. Do you do this? Do you do that? And so I do have linked for the board the assessment tool and then the summary. And some of the things that we'll talk about at our safety meeting next week that came out of this, which is the purpose of doing the assessment to begin with, is to learn from it and improve, is clarity for our staff in every building on doors being locked during the school day while they're in class. Another one is making sure that we do a better job of promoting our online confidential bullying report. There is a specific spot in there which we haven't talked about as a board, but would have to be a mutual decision between the board and the city with a school resource officer. And then finally, one of the things that they really are promoting more recently are these barricades in front of main entrances that can be cost prohibitive to put in barriers. It also creates, not that that's all that important, but the maintenance people don't like that because they're plowing and shoveling around it all year. But there are some temporary things that you can do at a lower cost. The other things that I want to just make the board aware of that are in here are things that wouldn't necessarily belong in a school setting. For example, they ask in this safety assessment about gunshot detection systems, which the only one that I know of is in the city of Beloit, and I haven't gotten great feedback. It sounds like it throws a lot of errors when that goes off. And many of these, there are quite high costs associated with. Yeah, so, the other thing that I should let the board know about is we are, and I think Dana and I had a conversation about this, sending our administrators, to Alice training for a refresher. There'll be a train the trainer training. They've picked at the end of May instead of August, so they can do some planning throughout the summer to get our staff back up to speed. And, very happy that Lieutenant Jones believes that the Evansville Police will also participate in that. So we'll have a local community partner in with that as well.
Nate, are you gonna use the company, or not, I don't know if they're a company or nonprofit, for when you're looking at these, making these policies so that they're the same through all the
Yeah,
buildings?
and
I forgot their name, I'm sorry.
yeah, I love you.
I love you guys.
I didn't put it up here, but I do have a meeting at the first part of March, which makes me think I might need some coverage on my lunch pals with Mark that day to make that meeting. Where we remember that the county is meeting and they want to be able to use the same language, especially with the sheriff's department and local police departments. So if everybody's using lockdown, for example, instead of maybe another set of terms, we even had an internal discussion, do we call it a lockout or a lockdown? So we want to make sure that when that's happening, that we're using similar terms so that the sheriff's department and the county doesn't have to learn 12 different.
So that's like a county meeting? you
Yes.
have? Okay.
The next one is actually in Beloit at the Lincoln Academy.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Nate. Thank you, and thank you. Moving on to proposal for J.C. McKenna Student Council overnight trip.
Yeah, Joni had asked about being here and having staff here to represent this, and I said with the weather tonight, I said, I don't think there's a need because this is a trip that's been approved by the board before. The two advisors do a great job. Mrs. Kopp and Mrs. Isbell do that. If you remember, this was the same conference that J.C. McKenna Student Council got recognized for second in the state for the Spirit of Excellence Award. I haven't been to the overnight, but I've been to student council conferences in the past. You're usually sending some of your most active, engaged kids, which is fantastic, and then you get the same active, engaged kids from all over the state together. So there's definitely a learning piece, and then presentations about what you could maybe take back to your own building to improve in your school and your district. But then, of course, the overnight piece is there's a social element to this as well. It is chaperoned, but obviously the kids like that. There's a dance and things like that where it makes it worth their while. I do know at least a few middle schoolers that if there wasn't the social piece of it, they may bypass the conference piece, but because they know they're going to have some fun as well, they'll put in the work during the day as well. So that would be a vote next time on the 26th. So if there are any questions about this, I was a little hesitant with the cost, but that cost is brought down by some of the dances that they do. And if it is a hardship issue, the middle school does have funds that they can cover students that might not be able to afford that price.
All right, if there's no questions on that, update on math and reading, FastBridge results.
Hello. Last year I came in at 3 different board meetings and shared some FastBridge data. This year I'm going to add to it. Another report that was given twice a year was the AGR report because we use that FastBridge data. I just combined it. Mr. Perry and I have given you a few updates about Act 20 along the way, and so I'd like to touch base on the Ames Web data in this report as well. So I might be a little longer than usual, but I'll keep it moving. What you see there is a list of our FastBridge data for reading. We have 3 assessment windows, one in the fall, one in the winter, one in the spring. We really use that data in 3 ways. One is teachers get a real look at where their students are right away, especially in the fall when they're first getting to know them. It gives teachers data on how to plan for students, how to individualize instruction. It's also helpful in that teams of teachers, whether it's grade level or content area, they can look across the board, see if we have any gaps in our curriculum that we need to fill, if there's any way we want to instruct something differently because we're seeing trends. That's an option. The big one that that's probably spoken of the most, at least among families and maybe in public settings like this, is the intervention piece. And it's our way of looking at the data and deciding, you know, with limited resources, if we've got one interventionist at Levi Leonard, and let's face it, every kid would benefit from some extra help, which students are gonna get that time, because typically how that looks is it's a group, the intensive intervention in that red column. It's a group of somewhere between 1, maybe up to 3 students, 4 days a week, and that includes progress monitoring. It's very intensive, so we have to, you know, see how that data shakes out each window, each assessment window, so we identify who's gonna get those services. As you look at it, what you're seeing there is the percentage of students that fall into each of those categories in each grade level for reading. There's the fall data and the winter data. Obviously, what we would hope to see is those numbers on the left columns migrate toward higher numbers in the right columns, and in some cases you'll see that. In some cases you won't, and that's you know, definitely getting our attention, and we'll make some adjustments there. You see that third grade, we were still catching up on some assessments, and I mentioned Ames Web. We had a lot more going on than we typically do. So that's page in another link somewhere, but I think those numbers ended up being in third grade reading. That page?
It went down to
It
8.
went down to 18, and then
Yeah, it was a significant progress, it looks like, at third grade.
yes.
Okay.
No big deal, and you did have access to that in board docs. We just didn't have that when I submitted it, so. But yes, that's obviously the goal. We look at that data, we try to help kids as best we can. That yellow column, you'll hear me talk a little bit about win time, where that's an extra block in outside of their reading and math, where teachers will work with groups of kids on specific skills. That might be a larger group of 5, maybe 6 kids. It's a room with lots of other things going on, but that intensive intervention is to the left. So the next slide is about the math, and you know, the same thing. We want to migrate those percentages on the left to the right as best we can throughout the year. Important thing to note is it's a moving target, because what kids are expected to know and be able to do in the fall, that expectation grows in the winter and the spring. So they have to keep growing and trending upward to move into those categories. The Achievement Gap Reduction Grant is something we get from the DPI, and many of you have heard us talk about this in the past. They give us the resources to decide how we're going to use those resources in supporting kids. And it doesn't just have to be one of those options. You could actually select 2. You could select 2 in one grade level and 1 in the next. We have some classes that are under 18-1, but all classrooms receive instructional coaching, so that's the box we check. Because we use the FastBridge data you just looked at, I thought it was good timing to add that here. So page of the next slide. The process we use with it is basically what we're doing anyway, but the way we report it is to the DPI is very different. So we collect that fall data, and I put that in bold print because we cling to that fall data in this report specifically throughout the year. We identify students in need of extra support. We get some plans in place, and we provide them intervention. Step 5 is very specific to the AGR approach, though, because part of it is we're asked to share that with the board mid-year, then again in either late June or early July, depending on how that shakes out. So the next slide shows how that looks. What you're looking at here in the fall column of reading and math is not the percentage of students, that's the actual number of students that would have been identified in the red columns. Again, those are the students that we hope we're able to get them to that intensive intervention with Ms. Hyatt and at Levi Leonard. But as you look at the winter, that is simply tracking those students that were identified in the fall, and that's what makes the AGR report a little bit different than some of the other things we do. In the spring, we'll share that data, again, on specifically those students from the fall, so you can see they're doing well. This doesn't necessarily mean, as the year goes on, that the numbers in the winter and spring in the red might shift and ebb and flow, but for this report, those specific students that are getting that intervention, you can see how that's shaken out. So I would like to take a second and just kind of give you a couple reminders about Act 20 and in an effort to explain the assessment piece that we really haven't talked about at our board meeting. Starting last year, I began to talk a bit about it. I know Mr. Perry has as well. There's three large components about Act 20. One is the instructional piece. The science of reading is that large body of research over decades that tells us what exactly are the best practices in teaching kids to read, the brain-based research that says these are the best practices, and it's a combination of background knowledge with very explicit phonics instruction coming together. And that's one of the requirements of Act 20, that our teachers are trained. So that's a 2-year process. So this year, our staff has begun the Cox Campus training. It's been largely their PD for the year. And it is online, they had about 3 options the state named, and we chose the Cox Campus, and they're all on a screen. And I was just on one earlier tonight, and it's engaging, but we wouldn't want our students to have that sit and get type instruction. We want it to be interactive. We want them talking and communicating. So we do our best with it and get teachers in a room together. So even though they're required to be on their own screen and submit their own answers, that conversation's important. So the piece we've added to it is we contract with CESA 6, and we look at the modules from Cox Campus and the schedule they're on throughout this year and next. And CESA 6 works with Rachel Wenzel, our literacy coach, and they create opportunities for staff to get back together and say, okay, here's what we've learned. How does that look with our students in our classroom and our curriculum? So we really try to tie it in and make it meaningful as best we can. The curriculum aspect, I spoke about that quite a bit last year as we came to the board to adopt a new curriculum, very much in alignment with Cox Campus and the science of reading. That's Amplify CKLA. We're getting great feedback from students, families, and teachers about that. I'm hearing from teachers just saying kids are able to do things I haven't seen them be able to do since I've been teaching, and those are some experienced teachers saying it. So those 2 pieces we had in place coming into the school year, and of course it's our first year with it, so we've got some growing to do, and we're getting better at it every day. That first year, it can be a challenging one, but I'd say we're doing quite well with it. So I just expect things to grow and improve on that. The last piece of Act 20 is one we haven't talked about in board meetings, and that's when August was approaching, the state named Ames Web as the universal screener in grades 4K through 3 for Act 20. It went into effect as we turned the corner in 2025. So that's kind of been a quick turnaround and some learning. So Paige, on the next slide, this is actually an Ames Web and a state document, but that column to the way left lists all the specific skills we hope students develop. That column next to it on the right names the actual measures, the actual screener assessments that the students take. And to the colorful columns, you can see the fall, winter, spring assessment windows and the actual assessments they take on the screener. So you'll see how it kind of adjusts as kids get a little older, and it slowly leads into that oral reading fluency in 1st grade. Kindergarten has several of them. They are short, but when you stack several screeners on top of each other, it does take up some time. This document is more of our local document, and there's those skills on the far left under that column that says Step 1. That's where those screeners that the state named are listed for each grade level. Step 2 is when students score below the 25th percentile on any of those screeners, we do a little more digging to figure out what exactly can we work with them on, help us to identify those skills when we work with them. So when they score below the 25th percentile, we get some diagnostic information, and then we put a personal reading plan together. And we've spoken a bit about those. Step 3 is when you get to that, when in that 3rd column, it's really, again, this is our guiding document, but it lists the resources we'll use with those kids, and that will probably grow over the years as we, if we find a resource isn't showing us a lot of growth with what we're working on, then we make an adjustment. But Paige on the next slide is is the first grade, and you can see the oral reading fluency come into play. And you'll see, as you look down those columns, anytime you see the word fluency, there's a time component to it. And I'll speak to that in a bit. Paige, if you don't mind going back to kindergarten one sec, you can see a couple that are named fluency letters. Letter sound fluency, letter name fluency. That's when there's a time piece to it that I'll speak to in a bit. First grade oral reading fluency is kind of a hot topic throughout the state, and then we get to the second and third that looks very much the same. And oral reading fluency is a bigger part of it. If you'll notice the second and third, they have more diagnostic measures than screeners, because if we get some information that a student is struggling, we need a lot more information as to where, if we're really gonna help that student. So I just thought I'd take a minute and talk a little bit about fluency. It says fluency is defined as the ability to read with accuracy, rate, and expression while conveying a message. We have, if you've been on the board for a while, or if you've had students go through our schools, you've probably heard the names of lots of screeners like PALS and STAR. We've had iReady in this district. I mentioned FastBridge. Now we're on to AIMSweb. Fluency was a factor with each. It's just a more significant factor with AIMSweb. So what we're seeing is more students identified with those measures than we have with other measures in the past. What I'm learning is that's a common trend throughout the state. That fluency piece is showing up, whether it's a kindergarten student being expected to name a letter really fast, or a first, third grade student expecting to read a passage at a certain speed. That's what's causing us to have some high numbers. What we're learning in the science of reading and what our curriculum, CKLA, shows us is what's best practice is when we're teaching young readers about letters and sounds, it's best practice to teach them about the sound first. So if a teacher holds up that C, what you'll hear a bunch of 5-year-olds say is K. And when I mentioned explicit phonics instruction, that's a different approach than the day where we spent the first week on letter A and the second week on letter B. Research shows us that high frequency letters and sounds are the ones they should learn first, because it's going to help us to connect the rest as we go. And as they're getting that K sound, they start to blend letters, and they'll say K, at, cat, and they're really expected, based on the science of reading and our curriculum, they're really expected to name those sounds, because someday when that says caterpillar, they'll have the skills to work through those sounds. So that's how fluency is continuing to come up. Paige, this is the next slide. Oh, yes. I just added to this original slide, and I just mentioned the science of reading mentions learning sounds maybe prior to letters. Now, I'm not foolish enough to think that most of the kids in the class aren't saying, but that's a C. But our emphasis is on the sounds. Our curriculum aligns with that. But we haven't done a fall screener yet. We will next year. AIMSweb is placing that fluency component in the fall. Our curriculum, based on the science of reading, is asking for that letter naming to be introduced in the spring. So we're going to have to find a balance, and maybe it's just simply that C goes up. You could say, well, that's a C, but I know what you're looking for. It's a K sound. Yeah. We're looking at that. We also know that in some of those previous documents, the diagnostics, there's been a lot of changes to what the state has required, and that really hasn't been the case with the instructional piece or the curriculum piece. But the assessment piece, since we began talking about AIMSweb, lots of changes have come down the pike. I don't know if there will be a change coming our way based on the emphasis on rate and fluency. It could be, but we've kind of rolled with the punches as the changes come, and we'll continue to, and we do our best to communicate that to the staff. But there have been changes, and I know the state has received a lot of feedback from school districts, so that I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a little bit more about that. So those students who score below the 25th percentile and receive diagnostic assessments will receive a personal reading plan, and I know Mr. Perry has shared these as well, but they're a 10-week plan, and we name their scores, we name the specific skills we're going to work on, we name the resources we're going to use, and we progress monitor, and we share that information with families. About the end of that 10 weeks, then we're nearing a new assessment window, and so we're gonna collect some more data. What you're seeing there in the winter assessment, our assessment window is the number of students with personal reading plans in those grade levels. It's certainly a higher, if that were a percentage, it would be higher than what Fastbridge is showing us. It's certainly high enough that we're alarmed by it and want to make some adjustments in a lot of ways. I will say that at Levi Leonard alone, there are 53 students, K2, 53 students that have speech and language services. So naming letters and words gets a little tricky. Sometimes in IEPs, there will be language that says maybe the standardized assessment isn't appropriate for all students. Sometimes we just make a decision with the families, this is gonna be frustrating for the student, the data we need for the student we have. We followed this to the letter of the law because we don't wanna break the rules. And if there's some new adjustments to the law, we'll adjust with it. But when we say there's 53 kids in K2 that have speech and language services, there's a good chunk of them that might not even have language at that time. So there's some factors that go into play with this. So we're gonna stay with it, we're gonna adjust as needed and keep at it.
What were the numbers again, Mr. Schwartz? For how many kids are in, do you know off the top of your head, how many kids are in each grade?
Total?
Total, yeah.
Those are the totals in each grade. I just mentioned 53 across Levi Leonard had speech and language services.
Got it, okay.
That would have an effect on that score, so.
Okay,
A little under a third of that total.
okay.
Again, the last thing I want to do is come up here and give you a list of excuses. What I want to do is give you some information that helps you to understand what we're considering as we think about adjustments. There's a lot at play, and we want to consider it all when we make adjustments to better meet our students' needs. So I've talked about intervention, I've talked about targeted support, I've talked about red and gold columns. You've heard us mention win time, and ultimately what that is every student in every class has a math block. Every student in every class has a literacy block, but win time comes in, it's a 30-minute block where teachers can really tailor the instruction to what individuals need. It might just be some extra math practice, it might be a very, very strong reader getting some more challenging work. In many cases, it's those students in the gold column in groups working on those specific skills, and great things are happening there. Last spring, we were awarded a grant through the Wisconsin Reading Corps, so we have 2 tutors who come in every day of the week at Levi and work with students that would still fall under kind of that gold Tier 2 type column. And we also have a reading interventionist, Casey Hyatt at Levi, and Amy Jones at Tris. That's when I spoke to that red column and how they might work with one student, maybe 2 or 3. When we have high numbers, and we know early intervention is important for these students, their schedules, 3 o'clock comes pretty quickly when they only see so many at a time. So I do have to say I'm pretty excited about seeing possible postings for vacancies this spring because I know there was a K-5 interventionist listed there that would help immensely with this. My vision on that would be someone that could provide intervention for both literacy and math. We've certainly seen job descriptions in the past where this percent and this percent, I would want it to be that position to ebb and flow based on our data. Where are our needs, and if we can find the right person to provide intervention for both, while supporting teachers with their curriculum in math, because we do have a literacy coach, I think that would be a great asset in that position. I know there's also on that list a middle school position, and I could see the great benefit of intervention at the middle school because that hasn't been there since I've been. Said a lot here, and this is our next steps. Just continue to communicate with families. I do know when personal reading plan and lower than 25th percentile language comes out, it's stressful for families. And so when a teacher's able to talk to the family and say, here's some FastBridge data, here's what I'm seeing in class, this fluency piece is not uncommon, that's what we're gonna put our attention on, that's huge when we continue to communicate well. So that's important to keep doing. Maintain our growth of data. We're gonna grow with our science of reading instruction and our new curriculum. We're off to a great start, but we're gonna continue to grow. I did mention that balance. If we have to deviate a little bit from that scope and sequence, so our students are where Ames Web wants them to be with fluency, we'll do that. And I do think it's pretty important that, and it starts with me, is to maintain flexibility with adjustments from the state. I certainly had my moments. But it's important that we remain flexible, because I do believe the adjustments they're making are because they're listening to school districts, and that's what's most important.
I just want to give a shout out, because I haven't been down this path at all, but Mr. Kramer and Mrs. Jeremiahson were so helpful explaining things like, you know, my one daughter showing me how well she's doing in class and explaining how, like, there was a day where this happened to be a day that there was a substitute, and, you know, the reflection of this test actually doesn't reflect any of the work that my one daughter's doing, because she's like excelling in areas. And then, you know, test day comes, and I mean, I get it, I was a horrible test taker and it didn't reflect, but she took the time to, you know, walk me through that and show me exactly what she meant. And then Mr. Kramer had given me a call to be like, hey, like, you're gonna see this, and you've never seen this before, but this is how we're gonna help, and we're doing it as a class. So, like, it was really nice to have that conversation before, you know, opening an envelope and being like, what is this? Because I do, and the reason I touch upon this is because I have heard in the past of parents of getting that information but not knowing beforehand. And that was a real, like, you know, negative for them, because then they don't work in this field, and so they're just putting, you know. So I really appreciate whatever you all are doing as far as making sure that the teachers are able to communicate with us. I super appreciate it.
Quick question,
Yes.
kind of outside of the box. Do you foresee a time when the state or whatever will require so much that a grade level learns that the majority need intervention and help?
I don't know. I don't think so. What I do think, you know, there's that phrase, building a plane in flight. I appreciate this law because it ensures that our kids are getting what they need. And there is that building plane in flight with that assessment piece of the law. But I do believe they're willing to adjust based on the feedback they're getting, and I think they're getting a lot. So,
Yeah. They keep adding more and more, so.
they do.
Except for money.
Yeah.
There's
All the things, but not the money.
Can I ask a couple things? So the AGR grant was for instructional coaching. Is that what we're doing with CESA 6? Or is that a person? Is that time in the day? What does that look like?
Really what Mr. Parsons would code that is there would be a salary. And when we're claiming those funds, that is a coaching salary, yes.
Who do we have employed who's doing the coaching?
Rachel Wenzel is our K-5 literacy coach. And she's the one that works closely with CESA 6 to you know, make our learning more authentic.
And then does FastBridge and Ames Web, do they, on the screeners, are they screening for where students should be based on their age or where it is in the calendar year or a school year, or are they screening for end of year assessments? Like, I'm just curious if some of these results are because the kids aren't where they need to be at the end of the year because it's not the end of the year yet.
No,
Okay.
flows upward.
Okay.
What they're expected to know and be able to do in the fall, what they're expected to know and be able to do in the winter, and so on.
So like Ames Web wants them to have those phonetic things in September, but our curriculum doesn't teach them
Yes.
until March.
Yes. So my current thought process is maybe I'll go visit the 4K teachers and just to ensure that kids that are where they need to be the first month of kindergarten, their scores are reflecting that, because there's a whole lot of them, based on our 4K data, that are there. And if there's a piece where we need to work on identifying those little letters a little faster, then we'll do it. The reality is, when kids go off to win time, we're using data to meet their needs anyway. What's different is when we're putting it in a plan and rigidly sharing that plan and talking to families, it causes a stress that hasn't existed. And I just think the high numbers identified either we need to adjust,
Yeah.
or the state does, or both.
Well, it's just interesting that CKLA is one of the resources that's approved, and Ames Web is what they approved and said you have to do this, but the curriculum and the screener don't align. So
And the third piece, the science of reading instruction.
right, so it's like the state is kind of setting us up for having to build the plane in the air to try to figure out what to do to meet all the pieces that they need. That's telling us to do. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mark. All right, discussion of four-year old kindergarten site agreements.
So on the board calendar at this time of year, the board is supposed to review two things. One is the actual site agreements using our space, and then there's I shouldn't say that. Site agreement are we going to have Kids Corner and Magic Moments back in our building doing 4K. And then the second piece of that is the rental agreement. The rental agreement that will be up for a vote again next time is only for Magic Moments. For some point in time, I think one got off the other, and so we do have a rental agreement with Kids Corner that goes out to 2027. Magic Moments would be up this year. The site agreement itself, again, is you can see some of the things that are in it: operations, facilities, staffing, curriculum, funding. There are expectations of what those 4K programs are going to look like. And again, we are fortunate that we have Kids Corner and that we have Magic Moments, that we have Jamie, that we have Tina, because we also have Laura Martin doing it on our end as well. So there's really three different options. Some of them work better for parents than others. Again, we want to be flexible with parents. If morning works better than afternoon, or afternoon works better than morning. But what will go before the board are these two, again, the agreements themselves, and then the one rental agreement for Magic Moments. A couple of things. One is that there's really three numbers in there. There's the rent itself, then there's the per pupil reimbursement, so what we give them for how many kids they have per pupil. And then there's also another number for supplies. And so I had personally delivered these within the last couple of weeks. And I did have a conversation, I just want the board to be aware of, with Jamie Fellows today, actually. Both had time with, I had a little bit extra time with the closure of school. And so she and I talked a little bit. So we want to be good partners, right? Because they're doing the service for us, but again, they're a business that is running within our buildings. And so what needs to happen is we do need to be in the black. We do need to make a little bit of money on these, but we don't certainly need a profit from it because we want to be good partners. Very similar to Tahoe. So the rent hasn't increased, but neither has the per pupil reimbursement. And then the supplies haven't either. So within the next couple of days, Jamie is going to get back to me and say, here's what is going to work. Because if you can think about if we haven't increased our reimbursement, I think it's been at least a couple of years now, and I just kept the contracts the same as they've been. You can imagine what the cost of labor has done in the last few years, especially with daycare, as we're paying people more as a district too, because they're hard to find in that price range, they're having to do the same thing. And so when that happens, I'll run those numbers by Tom. Again, we simply need to be net positive. We want to, again, have them have healthy businesses. And again, they do really nice work for us, both groups, and they're all a little bit different, and parents can choose, where they want their kids to be. So you might see something a little bit different when we go to vote on this, and I'll let the board know what that update is. Whatever we might do with Kids Corner, we'd also do with Teen and Magic Moments, so that it's fair across the board. And again, make sure that it works for us too. If the numbers don't work and we have to raise rent and rent doesn't outpace what we're putting in reimbursement, that's just the bottom line of how we're gonna have to do it. But we do wanna look at it, make sure it's fair for them, because they have been good partners for us for a long time. And again, of all the things that I hear, parents, good and bad, usually there's very positive things coming out of all three sections of our 4K program. So that's what you'll see coming up. And again, the three things that might change slightly would be, the rent piece, the student reimbursement piece, and then the supply piece.
Can I ask a couple questions?
You bet.
Okay, so you're a state building, which means licensing doesn't need to come in and do the stuff they normally do with
Right.
other buildings.
Yeah.
My question is in here I see the $650 for supplies
Yeah.
that we give them, correct? They are, I'm gonna assume, then responsible, because I don't see a number in here, for paying for their 4K teachers to have the 15 to 25 hours of training that they need every year.
Correct. It's very similar to what we just talked about with Taher, that's all on
That's
that
will be
business.
on
Correct.
them, okay. And then my other thing was I know you said we haven't redone this contract, so, and maybe this isn't part of our contract, but I remember in Madison, we had a forecast how many students we would have come fall, and then anything over that, they wouldn't pay. And then obviously they did attendance the first Friday in September and then in January again. Are we similar to like whatever they forecast is what we're sticking to?
Yeah, we do have a pretty good idea, and that's why we run, and I didn't mention it in here, but I did give you some information on making sure that we know where our 4K numbers are. That's why we do that night fairly early before we do these contracts, so
Just
that
you have
they're
those
signing
numbers.
up for them, right
Okay,
now.
got it.
You bet.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions on 4K? If not, update on mid-year hiring.
I'll simply go down the list. The board's seen this before, of the bringbacks after the successful referendum in November, after the cuts last April. High school tech ed obviously is at the top of the list. It's a huge priority for us. We will have 2 postings, because we have a 1-year contract in a position right now. We did not have candidates mid-year that had licensure, and so that will be posted in March. I think the board is well aware of what might have to happen in terms of salary for us to attract quality people there. Science, we've been very fortunate. In the intern process, you take a student teacher that can teach half-time, and then they're able to observe the other half of the time. They do get paid. The district pays them $4,500 to $5,000, and so that wouldn't be something they would normally get. But then we get to interview them and hire them, and so the science department was able to do that. When they were able to hire Katie for this, free up Jim Qualheim in some of those biology sections, it really did help. That position will be posted. Katie wants to apply, she certainly can. Would know the students, would know our buildings and things. The LMC clerk, we've been interviewing. We started out, when we first started interviewing, we had 6 applicants. Now we're up to 12 applicants. As we go through the interview process, we're trying to find a match, and sometimes they're interviewing us, in terms of pay, benefits, and hours and things like that. I do think we'll get that filled, but at this point has not been filled. That started in late January with some of those. The district-wide music teacher, I want to own this because Crystal and I had a conversation, I don't know, maybe a couple days ago. So we did post that position. We had some candidates that were strong candidates, but wanted the position for next year because it's mid-year. Well, we're not going to hire somebody in a smaller pool for next year already, so that'll get reposted. In the meantime, one of those people that we did interview was interested in a long-term sub position. There's not a great way for me to bring long-term subs because those aren't board approved. So you see it tonight. I'll do a better job in the future so they can see what that looks like. It does have Cindy Zableski back at the high school. That does allow her to do some lessons. I know lessons can sometimes be, I wouldn't say controversial, but in a district our size, it really does make things personal that we're able to do some of that. We're in a much larger district, you wouldn't be able to. That actually is happening in 2 different times within her schedule. And then for term 4, there will be a music elective added to her schedule as well. The other piece, we do have a special education teacher that will be approved in the consent agenda tonight. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that we had this meeting tonight, even with the school closure, because they're waiting on us to approve so that they can resign from their other position and then come over mid-year. That's much needed in special education, if you've heard Janessa speak about it.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So, that's a new position for the special ed teacher?
That is a new position.
So does that mean that we need fewer, or we're seeking fewer educational assistants because we have a full-time, this would be a full-time special education teacher?
That could be possible for next year. In fact, we have a special ed allocation meeting set for March 5th to look at what we need for next year. Okay. What we're still hiring this year is still backfilling some of our resignations and then some of our other openings. Okay. So I think you and I had also talked, Crystal, even though we're hiring some of those EAs right now, we will have to determine what that need is going into 25, 26, based on how many students are identified and would be moving up the grade levels.
So kind of all of this is for this school year, reassessing.
Exactly. Yeah, good question. In addition to that, you're going to see high school Spanish. That'll be something that, as somebody in different roles, whether it was as assistant principal, district administrator, sometimes you have to get really creative to make sure that you find the right people. I'll give you an example with the Spanish position. Something that we didn't do this time, but that we can do. There are specific foreign language professional groups that if you get information out to them, they'll put them on their listserv. And then people that are looking at, for professional growth, looking at these same sites will see positions open. I was able to hire people from those sites in the past, knowing that they can then come to Weekend and apply. So we might need to do that because we had 0 applicants for the Spanish position, again, mid-year, but hopefully we can have a much stronger pool, and a strong pool come in the spring. Buildings and grounds, that just got posted within the last week. And remember, that's it's a combined position. It's not the director position. What we're looking at is we need a little of everything. So if you think of maintenance to help Steve Hurley in some aspects, Steve's a busy guy, and between all the buildings, making sure everything's up and running, and then he's coming in at different times. In fact, oftentimes he's coming in at night if a boiler's down to reset it, those sorts of things. We also then need what I would call buildings and grounds, which is oftentimes it's outdoor mowing, it's plowing, it's that, plus a fill for custodial. So the same person that might be working on an HVAC unit might also have to be plowing, but it might also have to clean bathrooms at some point in time. And we do have 3 applicants in now just in the last few days. Mark had mentioned the 2 interventionist positions that are there. We're obviously hopeful that oftentimes you're getting somebody that has gone to school with what I'd say is a 316, 317 license that's a reading teacher or a reading interventionist or reading specialist, I should say. That would be great, but again, as Mark explained, to have the flexibility maybe to do some math, if that's where the data and the need lead us, would be good. Another one, obviously, that'll come in the spring is District Advanced Learning Coordinator. Really important. We've got some great kids. I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but if you've been watching social media in the last couple of days, we had Xavier Diebold as a National Merit finalist. Leads to thousands of dollars in scholarships and things like that. And so at that other end, Mark's been talking about our struggling students in math and reading. You also need somebody to make sure that our kids that need to be pushed, that are really bright, have those opportunities as well, especially, about K-8, because once they get to the high school, there's so many more opportunities in terms of the advanced placement and rigorous courses there that needs to be supplemented at elementary and middle. And then,
Mary, is it okay for me to interrupt there?
you sure.
I also think about that advanced learning position, and I would want to ensure that person, Kelly Fanto, was great. She took on so much with our online learning. She didn't have any time to go work with kids. She's a hard worker, she's busy, her plate was full. I would hope to keep that advanced learning coordinator both coordinating and coming down to the Grove campus to work with kids during those win times. So I just wanted to throw that out.
And you will see in a position like that, as Mark's explaining it, doing all kinds of, I hate to call them enrichment because it sounds like fluff, but you're talking about math competitions, reading competitions, really pushing kids to do their very best, and then they see some value in that and really take pride in how far they can push themselves. Last but not least, the amount of reporting is huge. We've talked about this already. Paige and I, it's probably going to fall more on Paige. She's got a huge DPI staffing report that has to go out. It has every single one of our staff by experience, gender, license, so that's all tracked at the state level. That has to be done annually. Right now, Kelly Day is in the midst of a very long process with civil rights data, which is the CRDC, another huge one. I mean, you're even going into tracking how many students are in our extracurriculars at what level, because I think, Hope had brought it up earlier. They want to make sure that there's not disparities, like are 2/3 of your, male students in things, but only 20% of your female students, and then what kinds of things are they involved in? That's just one piece of that report. It also goes into discipline and things like that as well. So those are just two general reports that come around this time of year. There's also so much more. If you go back to when really state accountability started about a decade ago, what we have in Skyward is literally in a state database the next day at 12:01. Most of that data is drawn out. And so we have to be in compliance with that. I even talked to Sarah Coberly, who's at the high school in the counseling department, and there's snapshots. We need to make sure that our snapshots are accurate within WISE, so that when they finally pull those and you have a chance to change it, what we're presenting as data for Evansville is accurate. So there's a lot of that. In addition, although we don't have that front and center, Mark did have some assistance in the past that he no longer has this year. So that position would also help with curriculum instruction. Just things like, I've seen Mark, not pulling his hair, he's got a fine head of hair, but things like finding subscriptions. If you can imagine how many software subscriptions that we have from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade in simple kinds of programs for our early elementary, all the way up to more advanced things for our high school English teachers, and then trying to keep track of those kinds of things. He's doing that himself, which he's learning a lot, but that's not something that typically the director would do as well, so it would play into that as well. We are hopeful, even with our EAs and some of the positions that you're seeing tonight, we don't feel like we're settling on any of these positions. when that happens, for example, I'm sure Janessa would tell you, we keep that position open. We continue to grind and find people that are going to be good fits for us. We don't want to just fill the position. We want to fill it with somebody that's going to be a quality person for us.
Can I give one suggestion?
You bet.
The Evansville page, the school district's page for employment.
Yeah.
And I know I'm being picky because, but like, it's really hard to follow. Like, your writing is like this way in
Okay.
3 columns. And so, like, someone maybe not familiar with the school district would probably look at this and be like, I don't know where to click, or it's just all it's like
Formatting
yeah,
issue.
the formatting is really hard to follow, and I know candidates are at this point in time anyway, and the generation coming in are very like, I need this to be easily accessible and be able to just put in, and like, this is hard for me to read, so just
Sure. I saw Paige taking some notes.
Yeah, that's my department.
sorry.
Nope, it's all good.
I don't think that's picky, I think that's very
No,
reasonable.
it is like, I'll give you an example. I mean, Mark had a candidate that was struggling trying to apply in weekend. Luckily, we have a contact person, so they emailed Mark. We changed something in the posting so that they couldn't submit if they couldn't upload resume and transcripts and licensure. So we unclicked those. She was able to submit. We went back and clicked them back on because most people are able to do that. But I will say this, some things are not as intuitive, especially if you're not in education. It is a new kind of language to learn when you get into these, even for somebody like you talk about our custodial positions. We have had to branch out sometimes and look in other areas because typically custodians are not on weekend looking for jobs.
I was gonna ask, are all of our hiring postings on weekend?
They all are on weekend. With some of these, right now we've been able to fill our needs, but if that's not an option, like we have talked as a board about trying to use the Evansville Examiner a little bit more in our social media. Now we just started to do this again. I think that was a practice in the past, but maybe not as important. But we're also, when those go up on weekend, we're also sending those out to our staff because there's some word of mouth practice. Like, hey, if you know somebody that might be a good fit for this position, please let them know. Even our parents, and there's a number of people that we've found in the past that want to be on the same schedule as their students, especially when they have young kids. So they might want to work a 9 or 10-month position and be able to stay home with them in the summer. So we're trying to appeal to that population as well right now.
Paige, can we link weekend to here?
Yeah.
So, because like right here we have the contact, but that's just yours, and you're asking them to apply on weekend, but we don't have
I will make.
might just make life easier.
It's probably there, but it's goofy.
Got it, perfect.
Any questions, comments for Nate? All right, next is the donation from Dennis and Becky Hughes. I'm assuming everybody's okay with that. So, I'd like to say thank you to them.
Yes,
Um,
I'll second that.
and takeaways from the State Education Convention.
I'll be real brief with this, having gone to about 8 different sessions. By the way, if the board is interested, Tom wasn't able to make it out. He hadn't gotten plowed out yet today, so he did submit. I put it into the board packet, but he had some interesting, I think some sessions that maybe Elliot was in as well in terms of budget planning. For me, the one that I would probably point out as maybe most useful is to this board right now is there was a presentation by WASB, which we're of course a member of, and one of the things that they mentioned is as we get the next generation of employees coming out of college and applying for jobs, they're researching you in different ways. And they had, they cited that especially your 20, 22, 23-year-old recent graduates, if they've got an area where they know they want to go and there's multiple openings, they might be watching. They actually said they will watch your board meetings because almost all of them now are accessible online to get a sense of climate, culture, the feel of the district. And if
Did you
it,
see the strawberries?
they're doing some research. I can't tell you how many, and this did not used to happen years ago, how many interviews now where they genuinely want to ask the people on the interview committee, why do you like working in Evansville? What is it about Evansville that makes you want to come and stay here? And it is a way to, brag and talk about why we like it here. But that is a key element in their process of, like, do I even though I've applied for the job, I've accepted an interview, I want to hear about these things before, if you're going to offer me a job, if I'm going to accept.
The
So,
first question we always get is, what's your culture here?
yeah.
It's been like the top question of almost every candidate I've had.
So that was one, and I know Tom had some others, but I'll pass it over to.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed the convention. The delegate assembly was kind of like a school board meeting with 400 school board members, which I think sounds to some people unappealing. I quite enjoyed it. One thing I learned from that is we talked about the resolution to decouple public and private school funding. We kind of talked about that as a good thing. It turns out that actually would be a terrible thing, and it would further empower private school funding to be less regulated. And that did not pass after some good discussion on that. I'd be happy to, anyone, if you're more interested in this, I could go into that in detail. Not this forum, but I went to some great breakout sessions. I was trying to tailor the ones I went to around policy because I'm on the policy committee. I went to several interesting ones about the policy and legal implications of AI and its use both in the classroom and by teachers, and really seems like we need to be thinking about this a lot more. Both of the sessions I went to, they recommended developing an AI roadmap for your district. There's some legal implications that I hadn't even thought of, is depending on, like, a lot of teachers are already using AI, and depending on the model they're using, if there any kind of student personal data that might get input into that presents liability for us if that information is then utilized in the model to train the model. And so there's just a lot of different implications that I had not considered that we should start considering. So I have multiple pages of notes just from the 2 AI sessions I went to. Otherwise, I went to, I think, the WASB legal update and another similar one. But yeah, I think besides that, the governor spoke one day, and he talked about the budget, the upcoming budget. Sounds like there's some good things coming. I think one thing he mentioned was that special education reimbursement in the budget will be 60% instead of 30%. Is that what he was talking about? Or that's what he's hoping for? So that would be a really big improvement. Otherwise, I was really grateful to be there. I appreciate the district sending me, and I really hope to go back in the future.
This, I won't extend the conversation much, but that was, usually they'll do at like maybe half the sessions, they'll ask, like, who's in the room? How many school board members? Do we have any teachers? How many administrators? This was by far the largest percentage of school board members. I think there was, in most of my sessions, usually 2/3 to 3/4 of participants were school board members.
Yeah. I do want to shout out the student bands that played at the three general sessions. They were all, the first one was, I don't see them here, but they were all fantastic. I quite enjoyed all of them. I didn't realize that was going to happen, and each session started with like 20 minutes of performance, and it was lovely. So.
Thanks for going.
Yes, thanks. Sounds like you want to go next year.
I would love to, yeah.
There you go.
Delegate.
All right, moving on to board policy.
Yeah, just, again, this would be the first reading. We bring it back twice. You've had updates along the way. Second reading would happen, again, 2 weeks from tonight. That would be the approval. And if you do see something that you want edited or changed, I would just suggest that you email that to me, and then I would share that with Hope, Elliott, and Crystal, who are also on the committee. The last time we did meet, Tim has been good about realizing the situation that we're in as a district and then trying to get us to where we want to be as fast as we can, but also prudently in doing our due diligence and work. So I am excited about where we could be in another, 6 to 7, 8 months and have all those new policies roll over, including, again, I know Neola's working on an AI policy, and so that we're not having as much work, but then everything that we're working on is new and updated and is relevant to what's going on either politically or with the legislature or any kind of change in law. So.
No questions, let's move on to business action items. First one is approval for a paid advisor position for the green team. I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
No, you gotta.
I wanted it. I make a motion to approve a paid position at 3% of base salary for the green team advisor effective immediately.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, any discussion? Now let's vote. Motion carries 6-0. Next is the approval of donation from Dennis and Becky Hughes. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept the $5,100 donation from Dennis and Becky Hughes to be applied to overdrawn food service account balances.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second, any discussion?
This might be one that Crystal may want to abstain from, but want to thank some people that she knows very well.
This is my parents. I did not know this was happening until the board packet came out.
Wow.
Please thank them personally.
Yes,
I
thank
have.
you so
I have.
much.
Make them a cake. Motion carries 5-0, 1 abstain. All right, next, moving on is consent. Does anybody want anything removed? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
There's a motion, second, let's vote. Motion carries 6-0. Next is the future agenda.
Yeah, we do have quite a few what were agenda items just as discussion tonight that will come back for approval. Again, the middle school student council trip, 4-year-old kindergarten sites, second reading of the 2000 series. One other thing that I wanted to mention is I did have a request for a statement from the district or the board, and as district administrator, this wouldn't be something that I would do independently, in support of our most vulnerable students, and was wondering if that was something as a board that you wanted to take on.
I think Crystal, talked about earlier that, I don't necessarily know we need to. Our strategic plan, it is all over that. Our mission is all learners thriving, contributing, belonging. And then inclusive culture, we commit to an equitable student experience, removing barriers and embracing varied viewpoints, backgrounds, and needs. So I think we're already doing it, so I don't see the need.
I agree.
feel like we are doing this effectively. I think it can be important to hear that stated again for some people. I think that it can also draw undue attention around those things, and so that could then prevent us from actually doing those things. And so
I do know, yeah, Mark and I are, I will be at the Becoming Better Neighbors meeting tomorrow. And if there's some discussion there, it's certainly something that I can go back to individual groups of students within buildings and ask what kind of support they need or want, and be able to do that within those buildings, working with the leadership team.
I would concur in what, along the lines of what everybody has said, but what you said, Elliot, too, we do all of these things, we have policy around this, and I also want to keep students safe. And I worry about how making a statement actually might do the opposite.
All right, if,
I move to adjourn the meeting.
second?
Second.
You scared me, John. I was like, what's happening?
We get the subway.
Someone knows when the subway goes through because they start preparing the sandwich.
What was that? Wait, what?
The Subway knows. They're
Oh,
in
yeah.
the system. They know when it goes through. They start the sandwich. Good job.
Do you have the same order every time, John?
Huh?
Do you have the same
Motion
order?
carries 6-0, we're adjourned.
Thank you.